If you were alive in 1984, you remember where you were when you first saw Purple Rain. The music, the motorcycle, the stage presence, and Apollonia. Luminous and mysterious, the woman who could match Prince's intensity scene for scene. The film made her a star overnight. But what the audience didn't see was what happened after the cameras stopped rolling. 3 weeks after the premiere, while the world was still buzzing about Purple Rain, Apollonia received a call that would test everything she thought she knew about love, loyalty, and ambition. Prince's voice was raw with emotion. Vanity had walked away, leaving a hole in his musical empire, and he was turning to Apollonia not just as a lover, but as a partner in creation. "I've written songs for you," he said, "songs that only you can sing. But I need you here in the studio every day. This is our moment." It wasn't a demand. It was an invitation. It wasn't manipulation. It was passion. Or at least, that's what it felt like in the moment. 40 years later, Apollonia would describe that phone call differently. But on that night, in the glow of new fame, it felt like destiny calling. Before we continue with this story, if you're fascinated by the untold stories behind music's greatest legends, please subscribe to our channel. We bring you the deep, researched narratives that reveal what really happened behind the curtain. Apollonia Cotero was born Patricia Apollonia Cotero on August 10, 1959 in Santa Monica, California. By her mid-20s, she had appeared in a handful of television shows and low-budget films, waiting for the break that would change everything. That break came in late 1983 when Prince was in pre-production for Purple Rain. He had cast Vanity as the female lead, but just weeks before filming began, she walked away. Prince suddenly had a leading lady-sized hole in his movie, and time was running out. Apollonia auditioned in December 1983. When she walked into the room, Prince was at a piano wearing signature purple. He began playing, then said, "Show me who you are." She responded with raw honesty that surprised even herself. When the song ended, Prince said 5 words that would change her life. "You're not Vanity, you're Apollonia." The filming of Purple Rain was intense and transformative. Prince was a perfectionist, but he treated Apollonia as a collaborator in something larger. Between takes, he would talk about building a musical empire together, creating opportunities for talented artists. Apollonia began to fall in love with both the man and the vision. Purple Rain premiered on July 27, 1984, and the response was unlike anything anyone had predicted. The film wasn't just a success, it was a cultural phenomenon. The soundtrack would spend 24 weeks at #1 on the Billboard charts. And Apollonia, the unknown actress who had stepped into Vanity's shadow, emerged as a star in her own right. Magazine covers, interview requests, and, most significantly, offers from major Hollywood studios who wanted to capitalize on her breakout performance. But while the world was celebrating, something else was happening behind the scenes. Vanity's departure hadn't just created a gap in Purple Rain, it had destabilized the entire structure Prince had been building. Vanity 6, the girl group he had created and controlled, was effectively finished. And Prince, for all his genius, didn't handle abandonment well. He needed to rebuild quickly. And the person he turned to was Apollonia. It was 3:47 in the morning on July 26, 1984, when Apollonia's phone rang. She had been asleep for less than 2 hours, exhausted from the premiere celebrations. In the darkness of her small West Hollywood apartment, she reached for the phone, her mind still foggy with sleep. Prince's voice was different than she had ever heard it. There was an urgency, a vulnerability that seemed at odds with the controlled persona he presented to the world. He told her that he had been in the studio all night, unable to sleep, working on new material. He told her that Vanity's departure had hurt more than he had admitted, that it had made him realize how few people he could truly trust in this industry. And then he told her what he was planning, He wanted to create a new group, Apollonia'S, with her as the centerpiece. He had already begun writing songs specifically for her voice, arrangements that would showcase her sensuality and power. This wasn't going to be a side project or a quick follow-up to Purple Rain. This was going to be a statement, a demonstration that what they had captured on film could translate into musical success as well. But, he explained, it would require total commitment. The music industry moved fast, and if they were going to capitalize on the momentum of Purple Rain, they needed to move immediately. Prince spoke for almost an hour, painting a vision of what they could create together. And then, with a gentleness that caught Apollonia off guard, he said, "I need you to trust me. Just 6 months. Give me 6 months of complete focus, and we'll create something extraordinary." It made sense. The logic was sound. Purple Rain had opened doors, but those doors wouldn't stay open forever. Prince was offering her a chance to build a music career with one of the most successful artists of the decade. How could she say no? But there was a complication. On her kitchen table sat 4 scripts, film offers from major studios that had arrived in the wake of Purple Rain's success. Each represented a different path into Hollywood, a different version of the career she had dreamed about since childhood. Prince knew about the offers, but he framed it as a matter of timing and priorities. "You can do films anytime," he said, "but this moment, this energy we have right now, it won't last forever. Let's capture it while it's alive." Apollonia asked for time to think, and Prince gave it to her. But in the days that followed, the pressure intensified in subtle ways. He would call late at night to play her rough mixes. He would send flowers with notes that read, "The studio feels empty without you." It wasn't coercion. It was courtship mixed with artistry and ambition, wrapped together in a package that felt like destiny. And for a 25-year-old woman who had spent her entire adult life chasing a dream that had always seemed just out of reach, the choice became increasingly clear. 3 weeks after that first phone call, Apollonia informed her agent that she would be postponing the film offers to focus on the music project with Prince. Her agent tried to reason with her, explaining that postponing in Hollywood usually meant losing. That momentum was everything. But Apollonia believed in what Prince was building. She believed in their partnership. And most of all, she believed in him. The reality of working with Prince in the studio was both exhilarating and exhausting. Sessions would start in the evening and run until dawn. Prince would record the same section dozens of times, searching for a perfection that seemed to exist only in his mind. He would scrap entire songs at the last minute because they didn't feel right. Apollonia threw herself into the work, learning the songs and adapting to Prince's exacting standards, trying to be the partner in creation that he had asked for. But as the weeks turned into months, Apollonia began to notice something troubling. The 6 months Prince had mentioned kept extending. First, it was a matter of getting the mixes right. Then it was about shooting the perfect music videos. Then it was about timing the release to maximize impact. Meanwhile, those film scripts that had been sitting on her table were no longer available. The roles had been cast, the production windows had closed, and Hollywood had moved on to the next wave of breakout stars. Apollonia's agent warned her that she was developing a reputation as someone who couldn't commit, someone who chose music over film when the industry was calling. But Apollonia held on to Prince's promise. After the album dropped, after the promotional cycle, after they had established Apollonia'S as a legitimate act, then she could return to film. That's what Prince had told her, and she believed him. The album Apollonia'S was finally released in 1984. It received mixed reviews. Critics acknowledged the production quality and Prince's influence, but noted that the material felt like a retread of Vanity Six's sound rather than something genuinely new. The album sold moderately well, buoyed by the Purple Rain Association, But it didn't produce any major hits. There was no breakout single, no moment that captured the public imagination. And then, just as Apollonia was preparing to shift her focus back to acting, Prince made a decision that would shatter everything. He announced that he was dissolving Apollonia'S. The project, he explained, hadn't achieved what he had hoped. The sound wasn't right, the timing wasn't right. The industry had moved in a different direction. He was already working on his next album, and his focus was shifting to a new protege, a drummer named Sheila E., who would become the centerpiece of his next musical venture. For Apollonia, the news was devastating. She had given up film roles, delayed opportunities, and committed fully to a project that was now being discarded as if it had never mattered. She tried to talk to Prince, to understand what had changed, but his attention had already moved elsewhere. He was kind but distant, acknowledging their past while making it clear that his creative energy was now invested in something new. What happened next would haunt Apollonia for decades. She returned to her agent, ready to re-enter the film world, only to discover that the landscape had shifted dramatically. The scripts that had been waiting for her were long gone. More damaging was the perception that had formed around her. In an industry that valued reliability, Apollonia had developed a reputation as someone who turned down opportunities for projects that didn't pan out. Casting directors remembered that she had passed on their films. Studio executives wondered if she was serious about a film career at all. The roles that did come her way were different now. Lower budgets, smaller productions, parts that felt like steps backward rather than forward. Apollonia took what she could get, working steadily but never recapturing the momentum that Purple Rain had generated. She appeared in films and television shows throughout the late 80s and 90s, building a respectable career, but always aware that something had been lost, some trajectory had been altered in ways that couldn't be undone. It wasn't until 2015, more than 30 years after that phone call, that Apollonia began to publicly discuss what had really happened during those years. In interviews, she started to piece together a narrative she had been avoiding for decades. She talked about the 3:47 a.m. call, about the promises and the passion, about believing that she was part of building something permanent. And then she said something that crystallized everything. That phone call wasn't the beginning of our partnership. It was the end of my other options. She explained that Prince had told her something during one of their final conversations, something that had taken her years to fully process. He had said, "I love you, but I love my career more. I thought you understood that." And in that moment, Apollonia realized that she had been operating under a fundamental misunderstanding. She had believed they were building something together, a shared empire where both of their dreams could flourish. But for Prince, it had always been his empire, and she had been a collaborator only insofar as her presence served his vision. The realization wasn't bitter exactly. By 2015, enough time had passed that Apollonia could look back with a mixture of gratitude and regret. Purple Rain had given her experiences and opportunities that most actors never receive. Working with Prince had taught her about artistry, dedication, and the cost of greatness. But it had also taught her about the danger of subordinating your own dreams to someone else's, no matter how brilliant or charismatic that person might be. In 2024, 40 years after that phone call, Apollonia sat for an extended interview where she was asked directly, if she could go back, would she make the same decision? Apollonia was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "I was 24 years old, and the most talented man I had ever met was telling me I was essential to his dreams. How do you say no to that? How do you choose practicality over passion when you're that young and that in love with both the person and the possibility?" The story of Apollonia and Prince is not a simple tale of right and wrong. It's about two people who wanted different things from the same relationship and didn't realize it until too late. Prince wanted a partner who would subordinate their ambitions to his vision. Apollonia wanted a collaborative partnership. Both were valid, but fundamentally incompatible. What makes this story particularly poignant is that Prince's instincts about his own career were almost always right. When he made decisions that seemed strange or risky to others, they often resulted in groundbreaking music and cultural moments that defined generations. He had an internal compass that guided him to greatness, and he trusted that compass absolutely. But that same compass didn't account for the fact that other people's careers operated under different rules. That what worked for a once-in-a-generation genius might not work for talented artists who didn't have his leverage or his singular vision. When Prince died on April 21, 2016, Apollonia was one of the many former collaborators and lovers who mourned publicly. She spoke about his genius, his generosity, his ability to see potential in people before they saw it in themselves. But in the years after his death, as retrospectives began to examine Prince's life more critically, Apollonia became more willing to share the complicated truth of their relationship. She talked about Prince not as a saint or a villain, but as a human being, brilliant and flawed, generous and self-centered, capable of inspiring devotion and inflicting pain, often in the same breath. And she offered advice to young artists, particularly young women, who might find themselves in similar situations. She told them that when someone asks you to subordinate your dreams to their vision, you need to ask yourself a hard question. Am I doing this because it serves both of our goals? Or am I doing this because I'm afraid of disappointing someone I admire? She told them that love and artistic collaboration are both beautiful things. But when they become confused with each other, someone almost always gets hurt. Prince didn't lie to me, Apollonia said in a 2023 interview. He told me exactly what he believed to be true. The problem was, what was true for him wasn't true for me. His career could survive any choice because he was Prince. Mine couldn't, because I was everyone else. So what was Apollonia's career destroyed by? Was it Prince's request? Her own decision? The nature of Hollywood timing? The answer, 40 years later, seems to be all of it and none of it. Apollonia's career took the shape it did because of a complex web of choices, circumstances, and systems that can't be reduced to a single villain or a single mistake. Prince asked for her commitment because he genuinely believed it would lead to something extraordinary. Apollonia gave that commitment because she believed in him and in the possibility of what they could create together. Hollywood moved on because that's what Hollywood does. It rewards those who are available when opportunity knocks, and it punishes those who aren't. The tragedy isn't that Apollonia chose wrong. It's that she was never given enough information to choose right. At 24, in love and newly famous, she made the choice that seemed aligned with her values. She couldn't have known where those values would lead. Today, Apollonia Cotero lives in Los Angeles. She still acts occasionally, appears at Purple Rain anniversary events, and speaks candidly about her experiences in the music industry. She doesn't present herself as a victim or a cautionary tale. She presents herself as someone who made the choices available to her with the information she had, and who has spent 4 decades learning to live with the consequences. And when asked if she would go back and change anything, she gives an answer that contains both wisdom and ambiguity. I gotta work with Prince. I gotta be part of something that people still remember 40 years later. I paid a price for that, yes. But I also gained something that can't be measured in career milestones or opportunities taken. I learned who I was by becoming part of someone else's vision. And eventually, I learned how to build my own. In that moment of choice, in the darkness of early morning, with Prince's voice in her ear and Hollywood's promises on her table, Apollonia chose love and partnership. She believed the future could be built together, that opportunities would wait. That choice defined everything that came after. The 3:47 a.m. call didn't destroy Apollonia'S career. It transformed it in ways neither could have predicted. And in that transformation lies a story that is both uniquely hers and universally recognizable.